Good morning, it's Jillian. So, welcome to the Jilly Juice world. And if you just learned about me, the whole premise of Jilly Juice is to stay alive indefinitely, is to understand what it means to actually regenerate and release simultaneously without actually dying as the end result. And so, yes, I have some new people in my group. Um, I have new people on my Facebook that may have found me through my postings around piezoelectricity or 5G or anything that's electrical that I've posted. That may seem like it's interesting, but there's a huge, bigger picture. You know, understanding Jilly Juice is preparing to let go of everything you almost ever knew about what life means to you, what you think health is. And, I see people, like new people on my Facebook that are still promoting, of course, because they don't know. They're promoting like raw cacao. They're promoting all these different holistic type of foods that really in the holistic world would be very, very popular because it was sold as if you ate raw, then it's healthier. Little do people know in the holistic world that's not doing J juice that no matter what you do, if you're not healing and sealing, then it won't matter if you eat raw food or if you eat cooked food or processed or whatever. Yes, if you have imbalances, some foods, yes, will cause more imbalances. So that's why they recommend diets. But all you're doing is just buying a few years, all you're doing is buying a little bit of time left before the inevitable happens. And so what you're participating in when you're in the holistic world, promoting specific foods or specific diets or taking the remedies and all the different cures, you're participating in the short game. Now, I've been using a lot of economics terminology, like the law of diminishing returns, long game, short game. Um, there's other depreciation versus appreciation. Jelly juice will appreciate you. It won't depreciate you, like actual cash value versus replacement value. I used to work in the insurance world, okay? When I was at my wit's end, not knowing exactly what I'm going to do with my life because I never really found anything, even in my 30s, that could stay with. I decided to get my insurance licenses, and I learned about life insurance, yes, but also property and casualty and how they determine how to replace items that have been damaged in an accident. Okay, and then also determining a person's worth as far as life insurance and their premiums. And so, yeah, using stock terms like long game and short game, okay, that's a stock term, and then actual cash value versus replacement value. Well, right now, everyone that is not doing Jelly Juice is going to be looked at as actual cash value. What would it actually be worth to replace your parts as far as your body, mind, and spirit, minus then your depreciation? Okay. And then also with life insurance, what could you possibly make in a lifetime based upon your skill set and your lifestyle? And so that's how they are determine how much premiums are going to be, because they don't want somebody getting like, if they wouldn't have the ability to make $1 million in their lifetime, getting $1 million policy would cost probably more than what they could possibly afford. So that way no one's making money off life insurance. Well, with humans at this point, if you're not doing Jilly Juice, then yeah, you're going to be looked at as actual cash value, and then minus the depreciation. And how do they determine depreciation? They base upon age, because your age every single time, right after you hit maturity and your predispositions and your family medical history, they start factoring in who's they? The system that determines your worth. The system starts factoring in all your predispositions and your background, your lifestyle. And that's how then they will minus your worth based upon what they see as your patterns and predictable behaviors. And so understanding economics can be so easy if you understand the human body and how human capital is being used. And so when you work in and live in a system that is predicated upon anticipating and predicting and knowing when you're going to pass away, it's very easy to manipulate the markets. It's very easy to manipulate people and their spending habits. It's very easy to gaslight someone. It's very easy to tear down companies and build them up based upon the needs and the wants of those that are pulling the strings. Now, there's nothing wrong with those that are pulling the strings, because you need to have a heart, you need to have a brain, you need to have your vital organs in your community and in your body, because they are the ones, they are like the big men, the infrastructure to make sure that everything else is able to reap the benefits of life, okay? But you have to understand the world that you live in. You have to understand that you have choices. And so when you understand economics and not compartmentalize it and not bridge the gap between economics and biochemistry, you'll then look at, Wall Street, and you look at sociology and psychology, you'll see everything is connected. Everything is connected. And so I'm using, in my book, under like Why People Die, in one of my chapters, I'm using Wall Street terms. I like the whole law of diminishing returns because Wall Street terms. I like the law of diminishing returns because that explains exactly what people are what their experience is in this world if they're not doing Jilly Juice, is the fact that every single time they react to their cancer, disease, and chronic illness and their belief system about life and remedies and whatever, they're putting more into something that they're getting back. So they're putting more money in the holistic allopathic industry, more money into all their diets and everything that they think is being healthy, and they're getting a less of a return. See, that's the thing, is if you're gonna invest in something, get the best return on your investment. That's ROI, return on investment. Every company always analyzes the return on their investment, because if they acted like a human, applying all these things, all these remedies and reactions to their symptoms, they wouldn't stay alive. And a lot of companies don't. The reason why people are promoting breeding and reproduction is because they know that that human, relative to their lifestyle and belief system, is not going to last forever because of their belief system. And so they have to have someone to replace them that would have somewhat of the same genetics and the same thought process, and if they've been trained, would then carry on the family name, the dynasty, the company. But then as humans reproduce on compound predispositions, the offspring are not necessarily prepared or really, wanting to take on the family business. And so that's why sometimes the companies either have to go sell before they go broke, or the offspring runs the companies into the ground, which sometimes happens in families. Some family members, they run their family name into the ground because the last genetic line totally glitched at the end. So I'm definitely making some very, very complicated analogies in my book. And so it forced me to understand economics. Like, I learned short selling. Like, I'm not a stock trader. I think it's kind of exotic. Wall Street back in the 1980s, when everything was in its heyday, with Michael Douglas, Charlie Sheen, and all the different, the different chop shops and everything and all that stuff, making a quick buck, shorting all the companies, making up for companies. The sales world is just such a fast paced, so exciting. It's like gambling. And I love gambling. I don't gamble really that much anymore, but I used to work in a casino a long time ago. And I liked playing the blackjack. I liked playing the craps. I loved playing the pass line. Before, I was always taking the stupid odds like the field, because that was the only thing I knew, but I was always losing money on that. Where I made money was playing the pass line and behind the pass line. And so that adrenaline rush of just like, I would parlay like, 10, 15, $20 to like $100. But that was as far as, once I started winning and I got maybe double what I put in, then I said, okay, I'm done. I knew when to stop. Okay. And so, so that's what sales is like. It's like gambling. I mean, it's either you sell them or they sell you, one of the two. And that's why I like, the Boiler Room and Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross, and and matching wits, being just as smart as the other person to where they actually buy what it is that you have to sell. And then sometimes, yeah, you're always teetering on the line too of are you being ethical, or you're trying not, you always have to walk the line because you always have to be different than somebody else. But with the health and wellness and with the Jilly juice, everything is pretty black and white. You can't walk that line because a line, it's black and white. You're either promoting something that is going to be antibiotic and anti-parasitic or anti-whatever, which is anti-life, anti-you, anti-microbiome, or you're promoting something that is promoting growth. And then I'm looking at cancer. And I'm like, oh God, cancer. Cancer is growth. I mean, my dog has a microchip. I looked up microchips, and microchips can promote growth. Well, that's electricity. Electricity promotes growth. But why would a microchip promote growth in an animal? Because the electricity that's being sent off is then causing the growth in that area, which tells me why she might be, dealing with the body dispelling or letting that microchip go. But electricity causes growth. And so, so then understand that cancer is growth and the body's at a deficit. Then you realize that cancer really isn't bad, but only on bodies that are at a deficit and that have been taught to be at a deficit. Autoimmunity is no big deal as long as it's balanced. Autoimmune disorders means that you have too many agonist antibodies in some areas, which is basically growth antibodies. Because what they do is they take, it's the acids that are programmed towards a specific body, and they bind to receptors and they mimic, and they send the message to mimic that specific programming. Okay, so that's what agonist antibodies do. Antagonist antibodies then atrophy. They bind to receptors and they atrophy. They actually trigger apoptosis, which is a programmed cell death. And when you have a programmed cell death, then yes, a bunch of acids and other types of proteins come in and then disassemble that cell, that mutated cell. And so that's what the viruses, and all the different therapeutics and the detoxes, they promote autophagy or autophagy, however you want to pronounce it. And autophagy is out with the old, so it triggers apoptosis, and then in turn triggers agonist antibodies, which is the growth. However, you may not be then healed and sealed to retain the energy to be able to grow at an exponential level to where you can lengthen your telomeres. So then what happens is that, yes, you're out with the old, and the body is steadily cannibalizing itself to then be in with the new. It's like eating your own poop, which is kind of gross. But, I mean, that's, or burning all the furniture in your house to stay warm. That's a better analogy, because eating your poop is so gross. But yeah, but that's what, but that's essentially what's going on with those that are on the short game, are being shorted. When you're being shorted, you're only being used on the way up, but they know that you can be on your way out. And before you're on your way out, they then release you. Who's them? The employers, the body, whatever. The companies, your economy, your friends and family, they love you on the way up. But when you're on your way out, you start degrading, and so do they, and then people have conflicts with each other. And or someone is more of a burden than somebody else, or they weren't strong enough. Oh, I'm telling you, I watched some families fall apart because one person fell apart, the other person stayed relatively intact, and they couldn't handle each other. Because, yeah, some people do have neurological issues that cause then erratic behaviors, of which can be very unpredictable. And then, you would have to have a nursemaid around you 24/7, or you find a different way to live. And so that's why the long game is so much better, because you increase your value every single year. That's the whole point of J-Juice, is to keep increasing your value, not diminish your value, not lose your value. Some of you are at your peak and think this is going to last forever if you're not doing J-Juice. Obviously, you know from your predecessors that you're going to decline. Well, what if you didn't have to decline? What if the long game stayed the long game? The reason why there's a long game turns into an eventual short game is because, yes, when you don't have quality people living indefinitely, replacing the quality people living indefinitely. Why would you replace? Because, hey, maybe people's interests change. Maybe there's a catastrophic tornado somewhere that came out of nowhere, or a volcano came out of nowhere, or something. Okay? And so, yeah, so replacement value of somebody is really, if you were going to replace someone because of something completely catastrophic, not because of health, it would be then you would have, if someone were to insure you and you're doing the J-Juice, you would have no depreciation. So they would just replace your value based upon what you were worth on the market today. And if you're some in high level position, then anyone that would insure you would have to pay top dollar to insure your ass, which means it'd be very, very expensive, or it could be very cheap, just relative to how they determine the premiums. Because most likely, if you live in a relatively calm geographical area, then really what would cause you to die, right? So, it's economics and Jilly juice, and then sociology and psychology and social studies, and religion and politics. It's when you realize what is the foundation of all of them. It's belief systems, yeah, but it's also biochemistry, and it's also the fact that there is a very predictable behavior of people who are on the decline. But when someone's on the incline, they could be just as predictable, yes, but they're not easily led. They're actually sovereign. It's when you're on the decline and you really don't know who you are, you don't know anything about your body, you don't know anything about the world, you're like a kid growing up without anyone really telling you how the world works, then you're easily manipulated, you're easily led. But when someone's on the incline and they stay on the incline, then they figured out the key to life. They figured out how it all works together. And then they can see through the salesman bullshit. That's why you really can't sell Jillian, because you can't walk that line of ethics, because it's black and white, life or death. As soon as you go into the marketing side of it, you just participated in the death side of the industry, of the healing industry. As soon as you start selling remedies. And so when you sell that, yes, life can be painful, especially when you have to evolve, that's not a great selling point. I mean, it is and it isn't, if you understand it. But someone who wants to be anesthetized on the way out the door is not going to want to really live at the subconscious level, because they have used drugs and alcohol and sex and everything to anesthetize them, because they don't want to feel their evolution or feel pain. So Jilly Juice is, I tell you what, it's opened my eyes on everything. I've learned so much stuff. Like everything that I've learned the last 5 years, I could not have possibly learned in my childhood, because no one would tell me. I don't even know my parents' finances in my childhood. I knew that, yeah, we were relatively okay. The house that we had in Saratoga back in 2000 or whatever was worth, they sold it for $500,000, but then they lived in $1 million homes. But I don't talk to them anymore. Okay? So it's like, because, life goes on. People move on. Both my parents have my books. My dad has my new book. My mom has my old book. Now they live in separate places, but they come together every so often, and they could trade books if they wanted to. They could learn the protocol if they were to give me any ounce of credibility. But no, since I'm not college educated, there's no credibility with Jillian, because we've been trying to get her to go to college and be a productive member of society that worked this path and did this path, and since she didn't do it, then we're going to question everything she does and not take it seriously, as well as everyone else in the world that I used to live in. Oh God, if you don't have a college degree, then, then you're not really a viable source of information, because God forbid anyone should learn how to do things on their own. No, you have to be instructed by somebody else. And they're aging and degrading and dealing with cancer, disease, and chronic illness in their families. And they have offspring that will eventually hit that mark too. I hate to say it, but yes, predispositions do kick in. And so, yes, it's very easy when people are on the decline to predict exactly. And that's how it's so easy to apply insurance and figure out how to make money off of humans who are aging and degrading, who don't know any better, who are just kids in the system. And so Jilly Juice will force you to grow the fuck up. I grew up on J Juice. Like, I was growing up a little bit. I learned how to survive prior to the J Juice, but J Juice actually caused me to grow up. And you saw me grow up on Facebook during the last 5 years. Reacting, rebelling, learning, having my hardships. Okay. Dealing with the government, which is like a parental figure. Learning my boundaries. Oh, I'll tell you what, you will learn everything that you didn't learn as a kid from your parents and from society on the J Juice. Because, yeah, it's going to force you to grow up and see how the world really is, not how someone wants you to see the world. So, but then you also have to want it too. It's not like, all of a sudden you do J Juice and now you'll have all this knowledge. It's something that you're going to have to go after. I go after knowledge like I'm a sponge. I celebrate knowledge. The more knowledge you have, the more then you can see the patterns. The more data you have, the more you can see the patterns and establish then connections. And then have a different hypothesis and a different outlook than somebody else. How do you think, just learning about this alien stuff, which let me tell you, even John Oakes knows, I'm like, okay, I can't deal with the alien stuff. And then now I'm like, okay, wait, hold on. There is probably some credibility to it, because logically, does a human know how to do slavery, and how do they know about computers? It's not like they just woke up one day and just, okay, no, there is a higher power out there, and then it gets passed on, and then of course, with biotech, you need a prototype of some kind of body that you can manipulate the genetics. And if a person plans to pass away, or they don't really teach indefinite life, then it's easy to manipulate a human and have them reproduce. Now with the J Juice, this is the crazy thing with the J Juice. You can still take on those manipulations, and the body will release the excess and take what it needs to survive in the environment. It's when the environment changes, is when the junk DNA, when the things that weren't, the genetics that weren't turned on are getting turned on, because the environment changes. So when there's dark matter or white matter or whatever you want to call it, or when there's junk DNA, uncoded viruses that are looking for a home, when the environment changes is when it could potentially be coded and then be brought into the fold. And then any excess programming that isn't needed then comes out in the waste. And so, yes, humans and any biodiversity can keep evolving and compound the evolution, so as long as the environment remains stable. So it's not like you're going to do J Juice and you revert back to your caveman days. No, because the caveman days is not the society we live in today. We don't live in a fucking cave, dragging our women by the hair with a club. Okay? So no matter what, you're going to evolve to the level of your society. And so, if people just understood that if we want to evolve a society, just release the viruses in the air, come what may. let Darwin figure out who lives and who passes on. Because viruses are programming. Strong prototypes will take to the programming without any kind of interference from biotech. But the reason why biotech has to interfere is because there's so many weak bodies, because they've bred humans to nation build, to build infrastructure, and then biomanipulate them to then extract the valuable data to then build the infrastructure. That's the long and the short of it, or that's short of the long of it, whatever you want to call it. Humans have a purpose. All humans have a purpose. Now, once you figure it out, you were used for a purpose, and you put in your time, and you can still put in your time, but now you can start converting the energy to your purpose. You've paid your dues. What, John and Odd and Suzanne, all of you guys, you've put in many years to the system, which you still will, but you put in many years to the man. Now, you can still do that, but now on your terms, not their terms. This is when you take your life, this is when you take your freedom back, this is when you take your sovereignty back. When you finally figure out how the world works and you fucking grow up. And you stop rebelling, you stop, all the things that teenagers do when they don't understand how the world works. You know what I mean? I mean, that's right. Our society on the decline is like a society full of teenagers at different levels of evolution. And then you have mom and dad, mother and father, president, vice president, and whoever else telling you, yep, you can't do this, you can't do that, this is not lawful, that is not lawful, because, yeah, they're dealing with a bunch of people who don't understand their biochemistry or the world, and so they have to be directed and manipulated and fed stories to keep them relatively peaceful, because a society would not work well with chaos, obviously. And so then electricity is used to promote growth and to do what they have to do. I can feel the electricity in the air sometimes. I can feel the barometer shifting up and down. Sometimes I get a ring in my ears for a brief moment and then it dies down. Nothing that's crazy. I don't have tinnitus, but I could feel the electricity in the air. And there are those that know how to harness that energy, the electricity, and use it to their benefit. And now am I going to take the electricity in the air and power my whole house? Well, I mean, if I get a bunch of conductors and I figure out how to do it without killing myself, oh, yeah. Would I want to take, everything, take conductor, or take this, what is it? Those little long wires with nodes at the end and stick them in potatoes and power my whole house? No, that doesn't make sense. So I'll let those that are well-versed in electrical engineering figure out how to power my house, and I'll just pay them to do that. Okay? And put my mind to something that, already, that hasn't really been invented yet. All right, so that's it. But I feel really good. So yesterday I felt a little bit tired because I was out in the weekend, but that's what happens when you're exposed to new variants. Your body has to adapt. And when you're healed and sealed, then it's just a matter of taking some rest to let your body adapt, release the excess, eat food. You might be hungrier than usual. Do what you got to do. I mean, my dog had a good night last night, thank God. She went out around 12 to go pee, and she always jumps off the bed around 12 or so to go pee. So I let her out and go pee, and then that's, it is what it is. And so she's doing okay. But yeah, she was feeling just as sluggish as I was yesterday at the beginning of the day. And so her and I both go through we have the same bathroom breaks, we have the same eating breaks, we have the same evolutionary, she is my little shadow. She is definitely like my little shadow. And yeah, she's a good dog. So you guys have an awesome day. I'm going to go drink some coffee, and I just woke up, go write some more stuff. Stay on point, stay on task. Eventually this book will get done. But I really have to make sure I do this 100. So if the rate I'm going right now, most likely I probably won't submit my manuscript until about April. So look at late summer, early fall as the release of the book. But we have all this time. Nobody's in a hurry. Okay, you have my verbal information. You have all the stuff. I'm just compiling the information and making sure it's going to flow correctly. So I have all the time in the world when you think about it. Okay? But I want you guys to understand where I'm coming from and take the time to understand where I'm coming from. Watch the videos. Get my current book because it's still very viable. I don't break down the antibodies to the agonist and antagonist. I knew antibodies were the culprit. I just didn't know how to break it down in such a way because I didn't know that they can be broken down. I just learned how to break down antibodies to pro and con just recently, okay? But still, everything in the book is viable. Sugar and salt, the yin and yang, ionic and covalent. Antibodies are the reason why people live and die, and you have to have a balance of both. And everything else is just economics. Everything else is just pure economics. But you have to start from square one. Do you think that you should live indefinitely or eventually die? And if you think you should eventually die someday, then you should not be looking at the J juice. You need to go back into the system because that will fulfill your wishes. Jilly juice is going to bring you back to life, and yes, it's going to be painful. So if that's not where you want to go, because eventually it won't be painful, but yes, you're going to have to pay the piper. You pay now or pay later, one of the two. At least if you pay now, you'll live. If you pay later, you die. So you might as well, if you're going to have pain, make it work to your benefit and still live and enjoy the world that you live in, even though it's kind of crazy right now. But 7 billion people who are glitching, who are being recycled back into the universe, it's not going to be fun and pretty, but at least it'll be entertaining once you're on the J juice and you understand it. Then you're like, yep, I called that. Yep, I called that. Yep, I called that. And it'll be interesting. It'll be actually be an interactive game that you don't really have to be a part of. But you can call every shot. And then it ceases to be really interesting because then you know what's going to happen. All right, bye.